Of the bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright used the occasion to discuss efforts to improve security at embassies around the world. The event from the State Department is just over an hour.
2 years ago, at our embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, terrorist bombings robbed us of colleagues and loved ones, neighbors and friends. The victims included U.S. and Foreign Service national personnel and hundreds of other Kenyans and Tanzanians who simply happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Time has not lessened our grief or our sense of loss. Our thoughts and prayers remain with the families of those American and African who were killed or seriously injured. We honor their memory, including those with whom we served, for their sacrifice came in the line of duty, and they have joined the role of heroes we will never forget. Today is a day for remembering, but also for renewed resolve. This week we will hold groundbreaking ceremonies for new office buildings in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. The embassies that were attacked in 1998, like their counterparts elsewhere, were doing America's work, promoting development, building peace, supporting justice, and fighting disease. This is work no fair-minded person could oppose. However, because of America's role as the world's leading upholder of democracy and law, we are considered a threat by those who threaten others. We are a target for terrorists. But as we have shown during the past 2 years, America will not be intimidated, nor will we retreat from the world. For example, we have made great progress in bringing those who carried out the embassy bombings before the bar of justice. 9 of those suspected are now in custody, and we will not rest until all those responsible are held accountable. With the help of Congress, we have implemented physical security upgrades at every diplomatic post. We've established mandatory inspections for every vehicle entering our facilities overseas, and we've hired and trained 337 new diplomatic security personnel. We realize that our security may be threatened not only by terrorists but also by practitioners of espionage, and we have implemented a host of measures to control access to our buildings and ensure the integrity of our facilities, equipment, and documents. We've conducted security awareness briefings for 7,000 employees in the past 2.5 months alone, and are making annual refresher training mandatory. Everyone everywhere who works for the Department of State knows that security is their responsibility and a core element in their jobs. The United States will continue to operate diplomatic missions around the world wherever we're welcome and have interests to advance. We will do all we can to protect those missions and personnel while enabling them to fulfill their duties. We will proceed with plans to upgrade security at home and overseas, and we will ask Congress to reconsider plans to zero out funding for a much-needed international anti-terrorism and security training center to be located here in the United States. And we will work with Congress to obtain the resources we need to get the overall security job done, not just for the year 2000, but as far into the new century as we can foresee. It has been 2 years since the embassy bombings, and much has happened since, but the memory of those who were lost has not faded. Our determination to lead has not lessened, and our commitment to American interests and principles remains steady and sure. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. If I can, I'd like to follow up a little bit on some of the points that the Secretary raised and talk to you a little more about some of the steps that are being taken at the Secretary's direction, not only to pursue justice but also to improve security, both in our buildings overseas and domestically as well. Before I forget, though, let me also mention that we will be announcing her next trip. It starts on the 11th in New Mexico, and then Los Angeles the 13th and 14th, and 4 countries in Latin America from the 15th to the 19th. So that announcement will go up today for Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Ecuador. That announcement will go up today, along with an explanation of some of the activities during this trip. So you'll be all able to sign up starting today. Now, on security, if I can, let me review a couple of the specifics among the things that the Secretary talked about. First of all, she has continued our effort to bring the perpetrators of the bombings to justice. There are 6 suspects in the United States in custody awaiting trial. There are 3 in the United Kingdom in custody pending extradition to the United States, and there are 8 others, including Osama bin Laden, who remain at large. The United States has increased its counterterrorism consultations with other governments, including we've had formal bilateral consultations this year with India, Spain, Russia, and Canada. And in June, I think, as you all know, we've hosted a conference for Central Asian nations here to talk about terrorism. We are also continuing the pressure against Taliban through the United Nations resolution that was passed last year. And we have been exploring further United Nations measures against the Taliban. These could include a travel ban on Taliban members, the closing of Taliban representative offices, and an arms embargo. And these kind of measures are under discussion with other members of the Security Council. Finally, we've been increasing our assistance to other governments in terms of anti-terrorism training. To date, we've trained more than 20,000 representatives from over 100 nations at our anti-terrorism training programs, and we've been, as the Secretary mentioned, trying to get funding, looking for $30 million to fund the Center for Anti-Terrorism and Security Training, which would be located in the D.C. area to train foreign security services and law enforcement personnel in anti-terrorism methods more effectively. And we want Congress to reconsider its plans to zero out the funding that we requested for that item. There'll be a fact sheet put out on these measures as well as the next 2 sections, which I'll deal with briefly. Overseas security improvements have been a major effort since the bombing. We have taken measures to enhance security at every one of our posts overseas. We've enhanced physical security at U.S. missions with additional barriers, with reinforced walls, with bollards, TV cameras, guard booths, vehicle barriers, bomb detection equipment, window film to prevent windows from shattering, etc. We have established mandatory inspection of vehicles at all U.S. diplomatic facilities overseas. We've established in many places surveillance detection teams so we can watch for those who might be watching us. We've worked very closely with host governments on enhancing security and done such things as acquiring property around our missions to enhance the security, the setback kind of that we need for our missions. We've worked with people to close down roadways, which often results in inconvenience but doesn't result in major improvements to the security situations. And we've hired and trained 337 new diplomatic security personnel, special agents, technicians, couriers, etc., and 140 of those will go to new security officer positions overseas. Finally, on the domestic front, as you know, we've carried out a series of improvements under the Secretary's direction to try to improve security in this building. The escort policy that was established last year is part of that. We work to enhance computer security safeguards. We've now done security awareness briefings for approximately 7,000 employees since May. This was one of the issues that the Secretary directed and raised because of her determination to change the awareness and the culture of security around here. We've done 7,000 employees in security awareness briefings since May, and we continue to do those until we get everybody who works here. We have established new security barriers, state-of-the-art security equipment. We've increased the presence of uniformed guards, both inside the department and outside the building as well. so that anyone who might be walking around without the appropriate badge will be found in the hallways where they might go to. And we've also enhanced the training around here. I think you're all aware of the interagency panel that produced a expert's report for the Secretary. This was presented to her in mid-May, and since then she has directed the implementation of most of those recommendations. There were 43 recommendations from the report that focus on access control, physical and technical security, additional security awareness for employees, restriction of traffic, and additional resources for security. At the Secretary's direction, we have implemented the recommendations that don't cost money or that don't cost additional money that we don't have. Things such as the visitor escort policy, the security awareness briefings, the additional training, deactivating building passes for people who don't need them anymore. Many of the recommendations, however, require additional money. Our ballpark estimate is that they will require approximately $300 million and 900 new positions, including 500 security special agents, over a 2 or 3 year period beginning probably in 2001.
Is that here?
Those are the recommendations for improving domestic security. This is additional security for this building and maybe other facilities that we have domestically nearby. At the Secretary's direction, they are preparing, Diplomatic Security Service and others are preparing a strategic plan to implement those recommendations, figure out how much exactly it's going to cost, and once we have that, we will go forward with the Congress. Among the steps that we're taking already, you may have heard about, is an enhanced access control system. We're buying a new system for ID cards that would require us to run the ID through, but also to put in a PIN number so that we can identify the person with the badge and not just the badge. This cost is about $5 million. We've been able to find that in our existing funding, and we'll begin to install the new system either late this year or early next year, and the installation process will take about a year. We're also testing other forms of enhanced access control systems for more sensitive areas, but that's only in the testing phase. I'll stop with that. There's a large number of steps being taken both on the international diplomatic front and on the overseas security side, as well as here domestically. And I think the Secretary has made quite clear that this is going to be a major long-term project that she is directed to start. We have indeed started. We are indeed underway in terms of training personnel and making the changes we can. But as we proceed, we're also going to require funding, and I'm sure she'll be looking for that from the Congress as well.
Can't see your pass from here.
You can't see my badge. Well, that's because I haven't.
Oh, no, we got to wear ours around our neck.
Well, you know, you're not on camera.
True, but can I ask you if there's any estimate to the cost of spending overseas? I know it comes out of so many different, it falls into so many different categories, it may be impossible, but knowing how tight money is and how hard it is to get money from Congress, I wondered if you have an estimate, and I wondered, what is cut back? Clearly, you can't, you got to take from one column to put it in another. What is this costing? Is this costing the State Department attention to some other important issues?
Well, clearly the amount of effort that needs to go into actually getting the funding from Congress is enormous, and we are facing very severe cutbacks in many of these accounts, and we hope that those can be fixed, frankly, by going back to Congress before they vote the appropriation in order to get them to restore the full funding of the President's request. In fiscal year 2000, we had $554 million for embassy security. That was the full funding of the President's fiscal year 2000 request. But in 2001, we felt we needed more money to do this. The full House approved the full request. That was $1.058 billion. The Senate Appropriations Committee, however, marked up the bill to include only $637 million. So that's a significant shortfall that we think we're going to have to make up. This goes for properties that we're buying, rehabilitation projects. There's a $400 million component for security operations that's included in that, and then there's money for construction, including $500 million construction request. As you know, the estimates in the Crow report were significantly higher, and this is part of the ramp up to a higher level of security construction that we'll need in future years. So if we start out getting cut back, we'll never get to the kind of money we're going to need on down the line to get the kind of facilities that we need to have people be able to work in secure and safe places.
I guess I could ask at the Hill, but what is the prospect of these two figures being reconciled in a timely way? Do you know?
Well, I guess we'd say we hope the need is evident and that they would be reconciled and that we would get the full funding of the President's request. At this point, I'm not into making predictions about how it'll come out, but I think the need is very evident to those of us who need to live and work in these facilities.
As things stand right now, how much money would be appropriated for overseas, according to...
Well, the problem is we've got, as things stand right now, the full House has approved the request for security funding, which is $1.058 billion. Senate Appropriations, however, marked up the bill to include only $637 million. So we want the Senate to go back up to the full funding of the President's request.
Include the $1.508 billion, the request. Does that include new construction?
That's 1.058.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that includes some new construction. That includes $500 million of new construction.
I'm sorry, why didn't the administration ask for what Admiral Crow had recommended, the $1.3, $1.4 billion that the advisory boards concluded was necessary in order to make all of the renovations and whatnot overseas?
I think it's basically the ramp up. You can't go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, at least in the government. And therefore, in order to ramp this up properly, we put in the operational component, $400 million, that the Crow Committee recommended, and then we put in $500 million in terms of the construction, getting the construction started. But this is a multi-year plan, the second year of this plan. I guess this is the second year plan, and it includes a request for $3.350 billion in advance appropriations. So you see how the expansion will continue.
In the Crow report, they were quite disturbed to find out that, or to learn that the Inman report some 15 years earlier looked very similar to what they were saying much later. How do you explain what happened between 1984 and 1999?
Well, that's a long period of time, but I think if you graph the State Department budgets, including our security budgets for those years, you would see what happened.
Being a long timer would have been
the money.
There would have been time to make some of the renovations that would have prevented, I mean, the setbacks and issues like that.
There were indeed a number of Inman buildings that were built. I was lucky enough to inhabit one in Cyprus. It was a safe embassy with a lot of setback. But I don't think we ever had the money to do the amount of work that we thought was necessary, and we hope that doesn't happen this time.
Two quick clarifications and then a couple of questions. First clarification, you said 20,000 representatives from other nations have been trained by the U.S. so far?
Yeah.
Since when?
Well, I knew you'd probably ask that, only I don't have it. I think that's over a number of years. That's not just in the past year or two.
Could be even in total?
Yeah, 20,000 representatives from over 100 nations. That's a total over a long period of, or over a number of years. I'll see if I can get you how long that's been.
Okay, then another clarification, and then I'll get to my questions. Everyone likes the eyeballs. So does the eyeballs come under the new PIN numbers, or do eyeballs identification wait until you get new funding?
See, this one's easy to find because I drew myself a picture, so I can find it. The eyeballs is in the testing phase. I think one of the networks would think we were plugging them if we held up the picture. We have not, yeah, that goes down as crosstalk in the transcript. We have, Okay.
Okay.
The enhanced access control system, the $5 million system that we are buying and we're going to expect to put in late this year or early next year with a whole installation period about 1 year, that's ID cards and PIN numbers. In addition, we're looking at 2 other systems at this point, testing for certain areas that would require a higher level of security. At this point, we're not looking at eyeballs or hands, which are the 2 that we're looking at now. We're not looking at those for general use. We're looking at those for particular areas of the building which require higher levels of access control. But it's still in the testing phase, so we don't know how those will work out.
Okay, now for my questions. Those were just clarifications. The first question, getting back to what both Andrea and Terry have been saying, you know, it's always a matter of priorities with Congress, and whatever the White House puts at the top of their list is what they have the best chance of getting funded. A lot of members of Congress are saying that the State Department has not made this, and the White House has not made this single greatest priority in terms of what they're looking for funding for. They have too many requests, and this isn't the top one.
Well, I guess what I'd have to say is a couple of things. One is, as you know, the Secretary has said quite clearly, including, I believe, in front of Congress, that we can't be faced with a choice of having secure buildings without people inside or people out doing their jobs without any kind of decent security. You can't expect us to make that kind of trade-off. The security funding is part and parcel of the ability of the United States to represent itself overseas. Therefore, goes in the request as a major part of the request, but is not, you know, is one component of doing our job overseas. Second of all, she has made quite clear in her own remarks here in the department and elsewhere that security is one of her top priorities, that she wants to change not only the culture and the environment that we work in, but also to obtain the resources that are necessary to go forward and to have security at our facilities overseas. So I don't think there's any question in terms of how the Secretary has made this clearly one of her priorities.
And just to follow up to that, you know, families that lost people in the bombings, and others might say that it's an awfully slow pace that this is all moving at, for groundbreaking to happen this week when it's been 2 years, and for this to be a multi-year project. You know, when there's a national security emergency, things can move more quickly than this, and so a lot of people are saying this is going at too slow of a pace, given that all embassies now are deemed at risk, not just a few.
Well, I think certainly all of us who work in these embassies, all of us who lost colleagues in this bombing, are very sympathetic with the families, and the department has done a lot to try to take care of and help the families of those who were killed or injured, and to help those who were injured get better. At the same time, there have been a lot of concern on their part, justifiably, that this not happen somewhere else. And that's why I think it's important to remember the things that I did cite, that we have made physical upgrades to security at every single mission we have overseas, that we have deployed counter-surveillance teams, that we have added film-resistant, shatter-resistant film to the glass in many places. We've added bollards and vehicle barriers and vehicle inspections at all our embassies. So we have done a great deal to improve security in the meantime.
The State Department has done a lot to help those victims, but there's a lawsuit, as I'm sure you're aware, more than one lawsuit, by the victims who are looking for compensation, which they say has been given to the government, but not to the victims themselves. Could you give me some of the examples of what state has done to help them?
I'd be glad to. On the lawsuit itself, I'm afraid I'm not in a position to comment on that. We have let me go back to the beginning. The U.S. government lost 53 employees, contractors, and family members in the East African bombings. 12 Americans, 32 Kenyans, and 9 Tanzanians. Their families continue to grieve and to seek ways to deal with the enormity of their loss. In addition, there were 36 members of our embassy communities who were so seriously injured that they required medical evacuation, first to military facilities in Germany and then to the United States. Most of those who were severely injured have been able to return to work in Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, or at other overseas locations. When they need follow-on treatment for their injuries, we bring them back to the United States to ensure that they get the very best medical care available. There is one blinded Foreign Service national employee who remains in this country where he continues to receive extensive rehabilitation. We're certainly committed to treating all our injured employees, the Americans, the Kenyans, the Tanzanians, with equity and provide them with excellent medical care. In addition to that, we've provided over $37 million in assistance to the Kenyan victims of the terrorist bombing attack on the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi. This includes assistance for medical and social services, U.S. aid programs that have helped offset the costs of emergency medical care for those that are wounded in the bombing, and we've provided long-term medical care counseling, rehabilitation, occupational training, and we've paid the schooling of children of deceased and disabled victims. I won't go into the rest of that. The similar number is in Tanzania. We've provided over $9.4 million to the Tanzanian victims of the terrorist bombing. That includes $1 million for medical and social services, and then U.S. aid programs have helped with emergency medical care, long-term medical care counseling, rehabilitation, occupational training, and there's been another $5.4 million provided to improve the capacity of the Tanzanian government to deal with future disasters. So that's the kind
As far
of
as
things
personal
that we've been doing.
compensation, though, they'd have to get it through the lawsuit. Do you know of any plans to compensate?
I think that is the subject of the lawsuit, so I'm not able to talk about that. I have to leave that in the hands of justice that's handling the lawsuit. Okay? Let's go down here, Betsy.
One of the things that was also in the Crow report was the possibility of trying to regionalize some embassies to make them sort of clusters where a number of countries would be represented out of just one country. Do you know if that idea has gone anywhere?
Let me double check on that, because that was also the subject of the Overseas Presence Advisory Panel that looked at our representation in our overseas. And I think they may have ended up in a different place. But I'll check on that one. Barry?
Just this seems to be the occasion comes to mind. The building is the most visible part of the U.S. foreign policy operation, like the White House is of the executive. And, it's been 5 years since Pennsylvania Avenue was closed. It still looks makeshift, despite suggestions that the park be extended, East Street be open. There's a lack of permanence about it. It just looks like something they're trying out. Here, I can't figure out what's going on. A post arrived. You made some reference to a vehicle. There seems to be an arrangement where people sit in trucks or cars all day, and they periodically block exit ways and then get out of the way to let you get out and then come back again. What I'm trying to say, and I'm taking too long to say it, is there any master plan that we could be told about at some point, preferably with illustration, or is this a case of trying things out? Pillars arise out of no place. It really looks terribly makeshift. I don't imagine that's the way the State Department is going to look 5 years from now, but maybe it is. Is there a design plan for this building? Right now, it's not really very good looking.
There,
It looks like Berlin,
Thank
pictures
you.
of Berlin in 45.
not that bad.
We didn't do anything wrong.
Crosstalk. There is a plan for renovation in this building, actually, and security concerns are being integrated into that plan for renovation, and actually that will require certain street closings just in order to do the renovation. At this point, the issue of closing streets around the building, expanding the perimeter, possibility eventually of getting a visitor center outside so people would first get looked at out there. These things are being looked at as part of the strategic plan that the Secretary directed to try to implement as many or all of the 43 recommendations that she got. We are looking at the possibility of closing streets around the building. That would provide additional perimeter security, the ability to control things a little farther out from our doorways, and the setback for the building that we always look for. That would allow additional screening of vehicles, for example. At present, we're only able to screen delivery vehicles.
The chance that
Not
no, when
all
you
of
answered
them.
Terry
So-
before,
But
the
the answer
setback,
to that, the answer to closing off streets and expanding the perimeter and putting visitor centers out there and doing that kind of plan, that's going to require some serious discussions with the government of the District of Columbia. It is a big issue for them. And at this point, we have not come up with that kind of, as we're still working on the strategic plan, we haven't come up with a package to go to them with yet. So we're looking at those things, but we're not at the point yet approaching the D.C. government.
one thing you're looking at is setback, but there's no decision. Because when you answered Terry before, the Inman proposition included lots of, virtually entire, all embassies set back, I think, or at least most of them, and it was decided that's nuts. You couldn't set back the embassy in London, for instance. You'd have to
In
go out
many
of
places,
business.
we'd have to move and rebuild somewhere
And
else.
it would be
and that's
prohibitive.
a major funding question.
The State Department maybe will have this vast protective belt around it that used to be called D Street, is that?
Again, we're looking at the possibility, but we don't have a plan to present yet to the D.C. government, and it would require their approval, and we recognize it's a difficult thing for them to start closing down streets. Let's go to the back, Nick.
Been 2 years since the bombing. What are your feelings about Osama bin Laden still being at large? Are you dismayed about this? I know you're saying that you're going to continue to pursue those wanted, but how do you feel? It's been 2 years now, and he's still not been brought to justice.
Well, I think first of all, we'd certainly like to have him brought to justice. We'd like to see him face trial. And he has taken refuge in a place where the Taliban seem to be harboring him, and we have brought pressure on the Taliban and increasing pressure, looking at ways of increasing pressure on the Taliban. At the same time, I would say we have been able to disrupt a number of terrorist operations over the past few years, and we have put Osama bin Laden, you might say, in the situation where he can hide but he can't run. He seems to have found a place where until the Taliban decide it's time to expel him, he's staying, but we are increasing the pressure on him, and he can't go anywhere, and it's increasingly difficult for him to carry out any operations in the last 2 years. So we will continue that process. We will continue to increase the pressure until we see him brought before the bar of justice.
That's the policy you have with the Bosnian Serb leader, Radovan Karadzic, and it's been 5 years.
I don't know what you want me to say. I mean, does this happen overnight? No. Do we have total control? Can we send in the FBI or something everywhere in the world? No. But we have a strategy which at once isolates him, makes it more difficult for him to carry out any operations, and continues to increase the pressure on him and those who are harboring him in the eventuality, with a view to eventually bringing him before the bar of justice.
Richard, you said you're considering an arms embargo against the Taliban. How come this hasn't been considered before? I mean, if the U.S. has seen that the pressure they're putting so far on the Taliban hasn't been working, how come there haven't been such an increased pressure?
Well, I don't know at what point one has to, when one has to ratchet it up. The UN Security Council Resolution 1267 was passed last October. So it's been, about 9 or 10 months that was passed. At this stage, we think it's appropriate to start talking to others, to be talking to others on Security Council about additional measures.
Considering putting Afghanistan on the list of state-sponsored terrorists?
That's a different kind of decision, and frankly, I don't know where that one is.
The Taliban as a government before you can do that?
Acknowledge that Taliban is
the government.
I think,
and I was going to ask that.
That's a question we did deal with actually when the terrorism report was released. Thanks for reminding me. That you can't be a state sponsor of terrorism unless you're a state. And at this point, I'm not sure we recognize the regime in Afghanistan as a state.
Recognized as a terrorist organization?
I'll have to look at that. We're looking at reviewing other groups for designation as a foreign terrorist organization. I'll have to find out if that includes Taliban or not.
It's got to be, is there a government in Afghanistan? And if it is, what is it? No, I mean, the state has to at some point come to a decision. Even people you don't like, you acknowledge you're in charge of a country. Is Taliban in control so that it is the government of Afghanistan?
I don't think we've made that decision, Barry, and if we do, we'll call you right away.
But it's been a while. No, it's not just my personal curiosity. I can't recall such a long delay in a judgment as to who runs a country.
I can.
You can?
Thanks, Bill.
Could you give me an example?
Later.
Excuse me, Barry. It has been reported in the press that the Taliban has taken action to relieve Mr. bin Laden of some of his communications capability. Also, it has been reported that the bin Laden organization has split in two, now in separate camps, and also that bin Laden has been quite ill. He's, in fact, terminally ill. Can you confirm any of those reports?
No.
Okay.
The talk of further sanctions against the Taliban has been rumbling on for about 3 months now, and it seems that you pretty well agree with the Russians. What's holding this up? Why don't you just go ahead and do it? Is there any opposition in the Security Council to this?
I don't think I can give you a rundown at some point, but we've started our discussions. We've had discussions with other members of the council, and I'm sure when we feel there's the appropriate consensus that we'll move forward.
Can I ask a protocol question related to today's ceremony? Why was there a reason that the flag was lowered outside here, was lowered to half staff and then raised back up to full height again after like a minute? It was my understanding it was going to stay down the whole.
I'll double check on what the plan was. I'm not really sure.
But I mean, is it symbolic or anything like we're remembering these people, but that's the Stars and Stripes flags?
I don't know. Frankly, I'd have to check on the exact nature of how that was done and why it was done that way.
I want to change subjects, but I have a quick question on the internal Maine state security. When the information leaked out about the $300 million on Friday, members of Congress said that the State Department has not done enough to change the culture of indifference to security. Any response to that?
Well, I have to say, when you have the Secretary of State making security one of her top priorities, when you have the Secretary of State directing that it be a part of every member's performance file, every employee's performance file, of every employee's record as they get nominated for senior positions, for example. Those arrangements have been worked out and explained to Congress. Some of them have to be formalized in terms of changing the regulations. You have a Secretary of State who's pushing for security enhancements within the building, who has already made decisions on things we can do here, who has over the past 2 years made a number of decisions and directed more resources to support improvements to our embassies overseas. I think the Secretary has really done a lot, frankly, to not only change the culture, but change the resources, change the status of security issues. As far as I know, she is the only Secretary that I can remember who has had a daily meeting with her Chief of Security, with her Assistant Secretary for Diplomatic Security every morning to discuss the state of affairs and how well protected we are. So I think she's gone a long way. We've had 7,000 people already go through the retraining program that she directed, and I think we are indeed changing the culture and changing the way we do things with regard to security.
Can we move on to Egypt, where Mr. Saad Ibrahim has already spent a month in prison without charges against him, but he's accused of spying for the United States as the academic, the human rights leader. The state may have expressed concern already, I'm not sure, but do you have anything to say about the situation?
We have talked about this situation repeatedly, I think, over the last several months. I remember making a statement while we were up at Camp David about the issue, and we've talked about it before that from here. And we've had a subsequent statement, I believe, as well, right, Phil? Yeah. But let me, just to bring you up to date on where we are right now, there were media reports that Dr. Ibrahim was being charged with some very serious crimes. Following these reports, our embassy in Cairo met immediately with senior Egyptian officials, and they informed us that the government of Egypt has not filed charges against Dr. Ibrahim. So we're pleased to find that those reports are inaccurate, but we do remain deeply concerned about his continued detention without charges. The Egyptian government is fully aware of our concern and of that of the international community regarding the extended detention of Dr. Said Ibrahim. We don't understand the decision to prolong his detention, and we call upon the Egyptian government to make clear that formal charges against him, or better yet, to release him. We're also concerned about the continuing detentions of some other members of the Ibn Khaldun Center who have not yet been charged with any crime. We share the concern of many others who question the detention of an internationally recognized advocate of civil society and democratic reform in the region. Egypt, as we point out, recently endorsed the Warsaw Declaration at the Community of Democracies meeting in June. It commits governments to uphold democratic principles and practices like freedom of expression and freedom from arbitrary arrest. The United States takes these commitments seriously and expects those countries who endorsed them to live up to the principles to which they have committed themselves.
Do you happen to know how many other members of the group? You said others. If you know,
no, I don't have a number. I'll see if we do, but I don't think I have an exact number.
I mean, there's an implication or an inference that it's his advocacy of human rights that has caused him his difficulties instead of some civil matter that we don't know about. But
well, that's the conclusion that many observers have drawn. And given the fact that he has not been charged with any particular crime and he's been in extended detention, I think that's a fair assumption for people to make.
Was his lawyer then, who was the one who was saying that he'd been charged? This guy was just misinformed?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he had been told. At this point, the government of Egypt tells us they have not filed additional charges.
Additional charges. Does that mean that
charges?
Any charges? Well, are they hiding behind semantics here? I mean, has this guy been accused, but they haven't actually been, stamped or whatever by?
Well, again, I'm not aware of what they might have told his lawyer, whether they might have predicted something to his lawyer that hasn't happened. But in fact, we just checked on this, and at this point, they're telling us they haven't filed charges against him.
As of what 8:37 in the morning.
Yeah, sort of.
Whatever.
As of,
okay.
I think it would have been this morning, maybe yesterday, that we checked.
In Iran yesterday, the spiritual leader there, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, cut off all debate of a press freedom bill in the parliament, resulting in, I understand, a fracas on the floor there. Has the State Department considered or started reconsidering its recent policies with regards to sanctions in Iran? And at this point, do you have any reaction to that?
Well, I think our reaction is to reiterate what we've made clear on many occasions, that we do have very serious concerns about freedom of expression and freedom of the press in Iran. We would expect the government of Iran to uphold international human rights standards, including the right to freedom of expression. In terms of the limited measures that we have taken to improve our relationship with the Iranian people, to allow a few avenues of people-to-people expression to occur, no, I don't think this affects that. We have a number of issues that we wish to raise, though, in a direct dialogue with the government of Iran, and that has not begun at this point.
If the reformers who are elected can't pass the laws that they'd like to pass, I mean, what does that election end up ultimately meaning?
I think that's a question one could write a master's thesis about. I think we have noted the process of change. There certainly has been some change, some tremendous domestic change in Iran. As we all have seen, the process is not smooth, has not been smooth, and probably won't be smooth. So we'll watch this closely as we go forward. And as I said, we look to have an opportunity to address some of the issues that we have concerns about, to address those directly with the government of Iran.
Maybe I missed this in your answer to the initial question, but are you concerned at all that the debate was cut off and then was followed today by the arrest of another opposition editor?
Well, we've been concerned about a lot of these events, and I think what I made clear is that we have serious concerns about freedom of expression.
You have serious concern about people cutting off parliamentary debate.
This is part of the whole picture. the law to protect freedom of the press and the debate being cut off and the arrests, these things lead to serious concerns on our part.
Change of subject? Yugoslavia, we have another opposition candidate for the presidency. Do you have any comment on that? Would you like to appeal to them yet again to unite around a single candidate?
Okay. First, we think it is an important step forward that the Serbian, excuse me. First, we think it's an important step forward that the Serbian renewal movement has reversed its position and agreed to participate in local and presidential elections. With this decision, the renewal movement joins the bulk of Serbian democratic forces committed to participating in those elections in an effort to speed up the process of bringing democracy to Serbia. Second, more needs to be done to bring about unity of the democratic forces in Yugoslavia. The renewal movement should decide to participate also in federal parliamentary elections. Even more importantly, all democratic forces should come together around a common strategy for all these elections at local, federal, and presidential levels. This would maximize the possibility of bringing about peaceful democratic change in Serbia. We understand that the leaders of the opposition parties do intend to sit down and discuss a common strategy for these elections. We wished they would not first open up their discussions in the press, but we do think that this process of their getting together and discussing a common strategy is very important, and we hope that they can reach a common strategy to pursue.
What kinds of things will the U.S. be doing to help the opposition in these elections?
That's not a subject that I can go into too much detail about. I think generally our support for democracy in Serbia and the support of many in the region for democracy in Serbia is quite clear. We've had a series of discussions with people. You've seen in our meetings, in the Secretary's meetings, whether it's the meetings with opposition and regional people in Berlin she had not too long ago, the keeping in touch with opposition figures or with the President of Montenegro. We have continued to encourage and support a democratic alternative in Serbia. Sorry.
Same area?
Okay, let's go to the back. Let's go back and come up.
Talking of democratic alternatives, the Croatian president is coming to town. I believe he's going to have meetings here at the State Department. Could you give us an idea of what you hope to get from these meetings, and also some idea of just how pleased you are, or otherwise, with his performance since Mr. Tudjman disappeared from the scene?
Well, I think remind you first of all of in Florence at the NATO meetings when we welcomed Croatia into the Partnership for Peace at that time, and the meetings and remarks that were made at the time that welcomed the democratic course that Croatia was following. President Stjepan Mecic and Prime Minister Račan of the Republic of Croatia will in fact travel to Washington for a working visit on August 9th, 2 days from now. They'll meet with the President, other senior administration officials to discuss a broad range of bilateral and regional issues. We see this as an important step in strengthening the growing cooperation between the United States and the Republic of Croatia in the wake of that country's democratic transition.
Between the leadership styles of the two presidents?
We don't necessarily do leadership styles. We do democracy. And we're certainly happy to see the democratic path that they've embarked upon.
Serbs for a second. I don't think are you disappointed that the Serb opposition hasn't come up with a single candidate, or are you still hopeful that that they might do so?
Well, I do think they are sitting down to adopt and try to work out a common strategy. As we said, we would have preferred they do that, start out in private and then go public, but not start out first in public. But the fact is they're sitting down to work on a common strategy. There's still time to do that, and we're hopeful, to adopt your phrase, we're hopeful that they will be able to arrive at that and to present a united opposition to Milosevic.
So when you say the common strategy is a U.S. code word for single candidate, what does that mean?
We've said all along we think it's important for them to unify and to support a single candidate. There's different levels of election here, not just the presidential level, and there are different factors involved in how they operate in these elections. So common strategy encompasses the whole thing. But at the presidential level, we have made clear we think it's important to unify and support a single candidate. Right.
Romanian politician here, and it caused me to look back on some recent stories, and there seems to be a lot of disarray may be the wrong word, but there's a real splintering in Romania. Does the State Department happen to have a position on the huge spectrum of candidates and parties? There seems to be a whole political turmoil in Romania. But it's a different country. It's not coming out of a...
It is a different
It's coming out of a different situation. It's not coming out of a Tudjman situation.
I'll have to look at it for you. I haven't.
Your guidebook might have some.
I haven't had the occasion to look at Romania for a while. I don't have anything for you today. Rebecca?
2 trips. One, President Chen is apparently coming to the United States, coming to Los Angeles on his way to Latin America, and China today has objected to that visit and said that they do not appreciate the United States allowing him to come through here. Any reaction to that?
This is the normal kind of transit that's being done for the safety and convenience of the traveler. We have explained it to the Chinese. I think we've answered this question several times in public over the last week, and I'd be glad to get you copies of what we say.
Have you assured him, is he going to be making any stops? And it occurred to me that the date is listed as August 13th. President Clinton and Secretary Albright will both be in Los Angeles when he goes through there. Will there be any contact?
There will be no meetings with administration officials.
When you dealt with this, recently? I mean, so far, this is travel circumstance.
Here, I think I remember answering it in Bangkok as well.
He's got to move swiftly out of the country and continue on his ways. Is that the general?
It's done for the safety and convenience of the traveler. There are no meetings expected with any administration officials.
Okay, and then on the Secretary's trip to Los Angeles, will she have occasion to be in any public or private meetings, since it's coinciding with the Democratic Convention, where she may meet with any donors to the Democratic Party?
NDI is not donors, right? It's National Democratic Institute.
To go to any
she'll be
private
delivering an address to the National Democratic Institute in Los Angeles. She'll attend an NDI luncheon on the 14th, Monday. Address on Sunday in Los Angeles, and a luncheon, I don't know yet. We'll get you that on the Monday, the 14th.
Those are her only things?
I'm not aware of any other events on her schedule for there, but we'll get you a more precise schedule as we get closer.
Do you have any response to one of the Palestinians who was at Camp David, Hassan Asfour, who says that the United States still commits a lot of stupidities, and that Ned Walker is going around misrepresenting the Palestinian position?
Did you say that?
Yes.
I'm Buddy. No, I hadn't seen those remarks, so I don't have any response. Sure. And I think to try to explain whether or not Ned Walker is misrepresenting things would require us to go into detail on what he's saying. Suffice it to say that he is giving an objective and accurate rundown on the peace process and what happened at Camp David to the parties. He's had good meetings at all his stops. He's had serious discussions, I think, which demonstrate the deep interest and the constructive attitudes among Arab leaders with whom he's met. The Arab states with whom he's met, in fact, have expressed appreciation for the United States' role in the process. We believe, and all our Arab interlocutors continue to believe, that Jerusalem should be addressed in permanent status negotiations between the parties. So as we go through this period of reassessment and reflection on the results of Camp David, I think we may see a variety of views expressed, but certainly the trip of Assistant Secretary Walker is an accurate and objective chance to convey to people what went on at Camp David.
When you say he's been giving an objective rundown on what happened in Camp David, you seem to imply that he's not actually asking any of his interlocutors to do anything. Is that? Can you confirm that? Is that what he's just going around briefing them? That's it, or is he actually
I didn't
trying to promote compromise.
To go into more detail than I have would require me to go into more detail than I have, and we're not prepared to do that. So at this point, I just have to describe the trip the way we've described it in the past and not try to elaborate on that.
It gives a coloration of everything being kind of nice and constructive. The two quotes that I remember from Friday that came out of his visit was, in Egypt, the foreign minister said, if you think our job is to force concessions out of Yasser Arafat, that's badly mistaken. And the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia said there can't be peace until Israel goes up East Jerusalem. Does that represent the kind of helpful, and those are your two of your more moderate, those are your two linchpins of Arab moderation. Does that typify what Mr. Walker's running into, or do you think that's just for the street?
Barry, I'm afraid I'm just not in the position to characterize these meetings any more than we have.
We
found them serious, we found them constructive, and we found them useful in terms of increasing the understanding and contributing this period of reassessment and reflection on the results of Camp David. But in terms of sort of the specifics about they support this or they support that, I'm just not able to do it.
Those statements don't sound as if he's getting a constructive reading, but I think Jonathan's question...
Well, I said he found constructive attitudes among the Arab leaders he's met, so...
All right, but more to the point...
contradict that.
People say what they say, and I'm happy to believe what they say, because people generally say what they mean in the Middle East. But the point is, what is this 14-nation trip about over? And Jonathan's question, I think, is a good one. Is Mr. Walker a briefer, which often happens after major, diplomatic events? You send someone out to inform the parties who weren't there. Or is he trying to move this process forward? And to move the process forward, it would stand to reason, because the President and Secretary of State have both said it many, many times, neither side can get exactly what it wants. There has to be compromise. Is he out there, as Dennis will go out in about 2 weeks, is he out there to try to get some mood of compromise going by going to major Arab countries and suggesting to them that they try to create an atmosphere of compromise? Or is he just briefing?
I think I've got a shorter answer than the question, but here are several answers to things that you raised. First of all, we have described the trip from the beginning. The principal purpose is to brief Arab countries on developments at Camp David. Now, naturally, the discussions that he has in so doing contribute to others' understanding of the process, contribute to our understanding of the process, and we would certainly hope would encourage the process to continue and to reach a successful conclusion. So this is part of the process of, we think, enhancing the prospects in the future, but we're still, as I described, in this period of reassessment and reflection. Second of all, we recognize, and I think all the people we're talking to recognize, that the parties themselves have to come to the deal. The parties themselves have to reach the agreement. So naturally, we think that everybody who can support that should support that. But these are not meetings where he's going to negotiate with somebody else about the future status of Jerusalem. That's something the parties have to do. Third of all, yes, indeed, Ambassador Ross does plan on being in the region later this month, but he's going on vacation. And I think that's an important distinction to remember. Where are we? We're about fourth.
Wait, not so fast. Is he going to be? I understand he's vacationing.
What can I say?
Oh, you opened a can there.
I know. Let me just finish.
Either a guy goes on vacation, he goes on government expense to do government business. So
let's go back. Let me just tell you where Ambassador Walker is. Okay, he was in Tunisia and Syria over the weekend. He's now in Kuwait. He continues on to the rest of the Gulf states tomorrow. And by my counting, he's got Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Yemen, Oman, Algeria, and Morocco still to go. So he's out for a little while longer. Okay, now back to Ambassador Ross. Ambassador Ross does intend to travel to the region later this month for vacation. And beyond that, I don't have anything.
Well, if he runs into the Prime Minister of Israel on the beach, will he talk to him? I mean, come on. No, I don't mean you, come on. He's going to be in the area.
He's going to be in the area.
And I don't suppose he's going to put stoppers in his ears.
In the area. He's going to see people he knows. I wouldn't be surprised if he did see people involved in the peace process. But the principal purpose of this trip is vacation.
Will he go in a government way, with government support, on a government airplane, with the usual, or at least some version of the usual support, you know, his deputy, etc.?
Not that I'm aware of.
Will he be hosted by anyone? Will he be staying in anyone's home as a guest?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll double check.
Can you be more precise?
In the Middle East and continue with his work.
If he changes to an official status at some point, we'll have to report that to you. He gets leave.
Sure.
You know, he gets to take
Which
vacation
countries?
just like you.
Is it just Israel? Just Israel, or are there other
the region?
Yeah, I know. There are at least 14 countries in the region, I understand.
Well, 14 Arab countries. 14 countries of which he will not be going.
There's a lot of countries, and there's an authority, too.
There were a lot of members of Congress that were called and consulted during the Camp David talks. Was Senator Lieberman called, and did he offer any input during that process? Was he called?
Let me go back to this. First of all, I think the phone calls that the president made before Camp David were all reported on by the White House. So you'd have to check their listing of who was called. I'm not aware that the secretary made any phone calls to Senator Lieberman, and I'd have to double check on that.
Do you know if he independently offered any input or was in any way involved that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but you could ask him whether he did.
Could you tell us the purpose of the Secretary's trip to Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and Ecuador? Is there some kind of theme in this, or is it just, apart from the fact they're Latin American?
Shot around Latin. Dance tour.
Is there any particular occasion, or does she just feel that it's time she went there? What's it all about?
Good leather.
I can't even find my piece of paper anymore. I slipped it somewhere in this book because I didn't need it again. Here's another one. She'll hold a series of meetings to discuss the important issues and interests we share in common with these countries. Is that helpful? All right. Let me just describe. She'll be traveling to Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Ecuador, and as envisaged in that order, but don't hold us to it if we have to rearrange the schedule to make everything fit properly. Obviously, the issues in this region, democracy and support for democracy in the region is important. Economic progress and economic reform are very important in the region, and regional cooperation is also very important in the region, unlike any other region in the world. Now, regional cooperation, particularly with regard to narcotics, and regional cooperation more generally on economic issues is very important. So there are a lot of things to discuss in this part of the world. I'm not sure when the last time was that she had the opportunity to go down there, but I know that these are countries that she's wanted to visit for quite some time, at least since I've been around.
Is she planning a stop to Venezuela to see why President Chavez is going to be taking a trip to Iraq in the near future?
To ask him why he wants the dubious distinction of being the first Democratic elected chiefs of state to go meet with a dictator who invades neighboring countries?
Yes.
I don't think she'll be doing that on this trip, but it is a question that inquiring minds would like to see an answer to.
Comment on that, by the way?
Well, wasn't that enough?
Wasn't that
You have anything other than sarcasm to lob in the direction of President Chavez?
Wasn't that a comment? No, it was a question.
Now that he's elected and she and he's been sworn into office, how is she going to deal with him at this point?
At this point, well, certainly we have our embassy there, and we do recognize the democratic election and the accomplishment of Venezuelan democracy. So I don't want to denigrate that. But frankly, we do have questions about this particular trip that President Chavez intends to undertake. We do think it's rather dubious distinction to be the first democratically elected head of state to go meet with the dictator of Iraq. And we're quite concerned. We're deeply concerned about the reports that they're planning this visit to Baghdad. It's very hard for us to understand these reports, given that Iraq continues to flout its international obligations. Iraq remains unwilling to accept UN Security Council Resolution 1284. We're also concerned about reports that President Chavez would plan to fly to Baghdad without UN Sanctions Committee approval. It's Venezuela's obligation as a UN member state to observe all the Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq and the sanctions regime. We will be discussing President Chavez's plans to visit Baghdad with relevant officials in Venezuela in an effort to find some other means to accomplish his goal of coordination with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. We'd also like to make clear that in any contact with Iraqi officials, we would expect Venezuelan officials to make clear that the roots of the current confrontation with Iraq are Baghdad's 9-year-long refusal to meet its international obligations and, more recently, its continuing challenges to the no-fly zone.
Can I just...
That's what.
No, I wouldn't say that's
it's
why
next
she's
door.
not going to Venezuela. She's just not going to Venezuela.
All right, because it's next door.
There's
and
a
she's-
limited amount of time.
Sure.
There's certain countries that she wanted to visit on this trip. She's not able to just add others. She's just not going to Venezuela on this trip.
If Iraq...
No, I'm sorry.
Can we just follow
Yes,
up on
Dan.
this?
Yeah.
There are at least 175 countries in the world she's not going on this trip.
Colombia, but go back to Lee.
Follow up on this.
Yeah.
If the president takes this trip without UN Sanctions Committee approval, will there be any punitive measures, whether it be in the United Nations or through U.S., any kind of U.S.?
That's an if at this point. We would hope that that would not occur, but we deal with that situation as appropriate if it happened.
Something that you'd follow up with the OAS, or it's not through that channel?
Well, we're following up directly with the Venezuelan government. We're in touch with them, and we'll be talking to them more about it. Okay.
Was
Among other
the
countries,
decision
we're
for
not-
her not to accompany the president to Colombia, did it have anything to do with security concerns? They even took the kind of unusual step of noting security concerns in the White House statement of his trip.
No. At various times, she and the president travel together. Sometimes they have separate business to do in different places at different times. But I don't think either one of them considers the other a security risk, and I'm not aware that any decision on travel to Colombia was made with regard to security. This is just one of those times when the president's going down to Colombia. Obviously, she supports. We all support Plan Colombia and the steps the government of Colombia is taking. But at this point, she didn't feel it necessary to go with him.
Hold on a second, Barry.
Hold on, we got one more down here. Last one.
As predicted earlier this year during, well, even before the Secretary's trip to the region, there's been another outbreak, incursion by Islamic rebels in Uzbekistan. Do you have anything to...
No, I'll be glad to look into it for you.
Afghan-trained